Howdy folks, it's Meandering Mike in the Man Cave of Madness. It is the middle of the early evening, and we are doing a look at Mythology. This is a game from Yaquinto Publishing back in 1980. We're looking at this from the perspective of our Hexagon Alley segment. This is old, dusty, dark, dank, back alleyway look at hex encounter war games. Now you might say, wait, Mythology? A game of adventure and age heroes? Well, yeah, technically it is a hex encounter game. There is warfare between the gods. They're manipulating heroes, monsters, using natural disasters, competing against each other in an attempt to, I guess, just win, have the most victory points at the end, prove who's the biggest, sneakiest, wisest god out there in the pantheon. So this is designed for multiple players, okay, and it's infamous in its ability to not be able to play the game solitaire very easily. Now, there are basic rules and advanced rules, and one or the other, maybe a little easy. I can't remember if there's actually a solitaire scenario in here. I am going to zoom out a little more here. Zoom in, zoom out. All right. So let's do the equivalent of a quick unboxing. So there's actually 2 cards for basic rules. You could add it to 2 people to start to read it, or a couple of people could share it. Relatively simpler compared to the advanced rules. This may be the way to go to try to play it solitaire. The advanced rules, as you can see here, as opposed to being on 2 sides of this kind of, it's not exactly an 8.5 by 11. It's a slightly different size. So I guess this might be the equivalent of, like, what is that? A4 British paper, which is a little taller, but a lot more to it. Advanced game rules. So we are not going to dig in at the point and trying to, like, compare here the basic and the advanced rules. Like, that could be a topic for one of our compare and contrast videos, comparing the difference, on a particular game between their basic advanced system, or any aspects of games and their design. But we're looking at here today from, sort of how this is a hex encounter game, how it's kind of warfare-like, and I'm leveraging on this, piggybacking on this one, the fact that it is a Greek mythology game with monsters and events and things like the fates and the witches, muses, things like that, for the card game I'm working on in the Greek mythology space. So I'm looking in here for seeing, all right, what kind of critters have they used in this game? What ones might I want to do, knowing that, the scope of my card game is going to be much simpler than a old school hex encounter war/adventure game like this. Now, so not much in the way of these rules in terms of, like, examples of play and pictures. You've got to look at the counters, and, something to note, that defense and attack number, most war games will tend to have attack values on the left. And their middle values will tend to be defense if it's different than attack, or morale, or maybe range, and then movement numbers over here. Well, none of that on these at all. Defense number over here, attack number over here, unit ID on the top, along with the name, the picture. So Medea, she is a magic user. So there's a magic ability number here. It says when applicable. So if how do you know when their magic is versus a magic protection number? You don't always. That's one of the complications of this game. Where again, defense bonus. So this is actually a helper. So that number there is not their defense, that's their bonus. If you have the muses with you, you're going to get 10 to your defense and 10 on your attack. And this will add to your magic ability for protection. Whereas over here, to use offensively magic, the Medusa, Medea, etc. Now, do they have a picture in here of the, like a basic hero monster? No. Where's it in the basic rules? No. So, that can be a problem for some folks. Like, well, you know, most of the units do not have magic ability. So let's just go ahead and get in here and look at the counters. All right. So the vast majority, let's see, do we have, is that good enough? We're zoomed out. Let me see if I go to regular. So you can watch Fight in the Glare. So some names that you remember, Orpheus, for example. So there's many heroes, some of them Actor, Bellerophon. Let's see, can you see that there? Yeah. Medea, Ajax, Achilles. Now look at Achilles, 84 defense. So obviously much better than some of these people. Oileus, only have 43 defense. Peleus, 41. So those guys have probably died out. You know, you don't know much about Idas with only a 34 defense. Let's see, Laertes, 51. Perseus, 66. So names that you'd know. Odysseus, 76. With a 20 combat factor. So most of these guys have 10. Some have 20. I don't see any hero, except for Ajax. Ajax is a 30 attack. Oh, wait, down here we got Coronas and Castor. Coronas is pretty weak. He's got, a 20 attack, but only a 33 defense. 56 for Castor. Now, oh, there he is, Hercules. All right, are you able to see that? No, so I bend. That's the problem. If I certain angles here. So there he is, Hercules. Now he has an M, which I can't remember. It's like infinite or immune or something, but they use an M. There's very, very difficult to kill Hercules. I can't remember if he can actually die from like natural disasters or something, but he's got a 40. But yeah, special rules about Hercules, as I recall the game. So here are monsters. So this is the part that's particularly interesting to me. So obviously there's classics like the Minotaur or the Minotaur, depending, well, it's from Minos. Where is that? Minos or Minos? Minotaur, Minotaur. However you wish to pronounce it, I am fine either way. Medusa, Cerberus or Cerberus. Some people say, is that a hard C, a soft C? The Chimera, the Chimera, the Chimera. Now that's supposed to be like ha. It's not a kappa. It's the ha. The thing that looks like an X. So Chimera. It would be like you're clearing your throat. Chimera. Cough up some loogie. Excuse my. Sorry, folks. Don't mean to offend anybody, but sometimes I'll, ramble on. Now, so you look at some of these monsters. Typhoon, 101 defense. 96. Laelaps. Now, I have never heard of Laelaps. Except, back in my youth when I played this game, I may have seen this one. But I still didn't learn, what is a Laelaps? Lay down. That obviously looks like a giant tyrannosaur or something, some kind of dragon monster. Do I know any stories about it? No. I've heard of the Lamia before. Typhon or Typhoon, depending on what. A python. The great Cromaeonian sow, a huge pig, like a big wild boar rampaging around the countryside. Generic sea serpent, sirens, of course. So some of these are very classic things that I would definitely want to put in my game. Like, yeah, have to have sirens. You know, that's the heroic Greek travel escapade of, oh my goodness, you know, they're going to draw us dashed onto the rocks, and how do we, you know, do we lash ourselves to the mast? Do we put wax in our ear? How do we get around being killed by the sirens? Hydra, obviously. Harpies. No, Echidna, giant spider. I hadn't particularly known that that was related in Greek mythology. Talos, the big, gigantic, like bronze statue. I don't know if you've ever seen the old Jason and the Argonauts, Ray Harryhausen, where there's like a plug in the back of the ankle, and they figure out that they have to go and like put a spear in there, and they twist that plug out, and all the fluid drains out, and that the no longer animated. If you've never seen the old Ray Harryhausen stuff, you know, between Jason and the Argonauts, or even, you know, the Voyages of Sinbad, which is obviously, you know, much later, kind of your Arabian Nights, Arabian Pirates kind of thing. But those are fantastic, wonderful stop motion animation. You know, there's a cool, you know, centaur and a griffin and stuff in those. So I will be digging into this more. You know, satyrs, a king, so an enemy king. So nice generic. So these are big heroic monsters. I can't remember in my memory. So these are like various kinds of. There's two different kinds of treasures, and I can't remember the exact name difference from, like, so these are like questing treasures. They don't do anything for you, but they're like big points, and these numbers on them is like, that's what you need to do to succeed. That's like, you have to act against a defense, and you have to have enough points to, you know, your roll plus your quote unquote attack bonus. And so it's like your quest difficulty to manage to get these prizes. Well, these treasures / are, you know, like magic items, loot, you know, in your Dungeons and Dragons kind of environment, something like that. You know, if you're playing in ancient Greece mythological setting, this is the stuff that all the characters love to go for. So adding to defense, adding to your offense. Now, some of these armors, you get a minus in attack, but a huge bonus on defense. You know, gold armor, 50 defense bonus, but minus 20 attack. So it's like, well, you know, that sounds great, but I'm not sure I want to take that penalty. Helm of Invisibility, 20, 20, and 20. So defense, offense, and magic protection. Nice. Magic potion, Nepenthe, you know, a certain plant using for some kind of, I don't know if it's like a stimulant. I do not know about that. So I don't know. Is that something I should look into? And maybe there's some thing in the great, you know, travel event in the epics of these Greek heroes traveling that this might save the day. So certain potions, divine shields, swords, etc. So these look like just magical horses, whereas the Pegasus is one of these guys up here, and Pegasus' golden bridle it's I'm assuming 20 easier to do him, so it's like minus 20 on his difficulty. I'm sure that's somewhere in the rules there. All right, so let me look a little more here. Amazons. Now, what I'm not seeing here is, for example, like Myrmidons were a thing. They were the warriors that were sort of animated from the ants. I don't remember which god did it, but there were ants, and they were turned into these Myrmidons, these warriors. So that, you know, something that I might include in my game that I don't see here, because there's quite a bit of level of detail here on the different monsters. Again, what's the difference between these kind of level monsters and these? These are obviously, many of them are much bigger and tougher. Some of these, like, Satyr, he's only 36 defense, 34 magic. The King's pretty tough. He's got 74 with 20 attack. Barbarians, they only have 34 defense with a 30 attack. There's Bandits, nice and easy target. 31 defense, 10 attack. So some of these guys, I do remember sometimes it could be hard to get going, and you want to look for opportunities to jump on things that are weaker. Like, oh, here's this Stemathalian birds, like giant stork kind of birds that are eating, that's, like, they're actually grabbing men and eating them. He's only got a 44 defense and a 0. So seeking out to defeat something like that, or the Caledonian boar. A little lower risk earlier stuff, the Nemean lion, big ferocious giant lion, things of that nature. So I will have to, use this as an aid to go through, and obviously anything that has an interesting backstory to, that would be fun to weave in. It's, okay, here's Polyphemus, he's the big Cyclops dude, or like the king of the Cyclopses, I guess, which of course Ulysses encountered. So I believe the fates, these are numbered 1 through 32, I believe. And I believe that corresponds to I think there's 32 heroes. And like each turn you play, like, one hero dies. It's just like, hey, this is the time. The fates have picked him for death. So no matter, even the gods trying to manipulate and run things, sometimes the fates are just calling in their due, and that's it. Even the gods can't stop that. Now let's look at the map. Now this is one thing that graphically I have no idea what I'm going to do in my game in terms of, do I want to have, like, as like, say, the back page of the rules have a little map that sort of like shows the flavor. I'm going to pull back, zoom back. So I love this map. This is your totally old school, the world as viewed by the ancient Greeks and their mythological legends and stories. Here we are. Greece is the center of the world. And way out here you have the world ocean. And you render the Mediterranean, relatively well. The farther you get away, the more weird it is what's actually out there or not, right? So, if you look out this way, well, that's supposed to be Britain-ish, sort of, but you got Celts, you got the Hesperians, but here's Greece, barbarians, Lydia, so over here, they'd be fighting the Trojans. Egypt is relative, but the farther away you go, like here's the Red Sea, but you've got Kush and the Ethiopians. Well, it's not curving us like, oh, where's the rest of Africa? Well, we don't know. They didn't really ever experience that. They've got North African coast. They've got something down this side, but there's the world ocean, right? Here's Arabia. Well, here's Asia. Well, they don't know about China. They don't know about India even. So that's out there. The Sarmatians, which really seems to be, say they got the Scythians, which really is supposed to be like the Scythians, which really would have been more at the time you're looking at this is more the early, so 1200 BC up to the 400, 500, 600 BC. You got to get pre, the real civilized Greek world that we know a lot. 400 and 300 BC, and there, this mythology comes supposed to be before then. So Sarmatians shouldn't even be on here. That's a misnomer, because the Sarmatians came after the Scythians, and the Scythians would have been, but here's the Caucasus, here's the Black Sea, right? And so the Scythians would have been coming from here. The Sarmatians came, after the Scythians, hundreds of years later. And so, yeah. Anyway, Meandering Mike, meandering on about all those things. So I just love this map. It's an awesome map. Probably can't really use it in a card game unless on certain cards, I have a symbol that might take up, say, half the thing that just sort of shows a rough portion of the area that I, obviously couldn't be in a card game Hexagon, but something about the general area of like where you're questing to, or where you're making progress, or where you're visiting, something that adds some of that flavor to the cards. So that's something that I need to look at. All right, so I wanted to look at a few other things here. So the gods, there's 10 different gods that you can play. And I think this is designed normally for up to 6 players at a time. You have this log sheet, and you're logging points that each god spends to influence the 32 different heroes. They can do various controlling monsters, divine occurrences, the storms, earthquakes, etc. They can just donate points towards Zeus. It's kind of like just banking some victory points. But this is a system where over time you bid points on dudes, and you can wrest control from other people, or you can fake people out. So it's all hidden, plotted, what you spent points on. This is why this is nearly impossible to play solo, where you're trying to play multiple players at the same time. So at least in this incarnation, using this as part of the advanced rules. If you want to go see frustration, go watch Callendale. And he's got a couple videos on Board Game Geek, but if you go back to his channel on YouTube, you'll find another one that he didn't post on Board Game Geek, where he's swearing away and complaining about how he's playing the rules wrong and how difficult it is. And yeah, he chose to play like 5 or 6 players by himself. And like, dude, did you even try the basic game first? And try he would he had the attack and defense numbers backwards, and it's like it was not making any sense to him at all. All right, so cards, gods, events, oracles. So this is another thing that I want to mind through to look. So this will refer to some of these monsters, the Nereids, Phobos. Some of these are like minor gods, demigods, nymphs, etc., that aren't necessarily represented by counters, but some kind of effect. A Hyperborean feast. Pick any one god to attend. God must move there. So you can create an event and force some other god to move from one area to another, which is important because a lot of the gods have special abilities. That's something else that Callendale was like having a tough time managing. Okay, so here's all these god cards. So they can cause plagues or famines. They can give bonuses on attack or defense under heroes in their area or things. They can influence different battles. They cause famine to occur in one area of the map per move at no cost. Now, per move. Is that per each and every movement of anybody's heroes, or each of her moves, or what? I don't know. Sometimes these things are kind of ambiguous. But, so, I am not going to have, like, a lot of direct god intervention in my game, other than some of the events might, be hinted at that were caused by, Ares is unpleased and this king refuses to give passage. You have to do battle or something. So you might need to have some particular card to continue your journey. My game's not going to have battling per se. Obviously, Poseidon is going to a lot of times have, impediments, tempests, you wouldn't call it hurricane in the med, but storms, tempests, etc., big maelstroms in the water, things like that. So yeah, I'll be looking at these for ideas, amongst all the other games I'm looking at, and what kind of things have been done before. I don't want to repeat, but I want to say, hey, these are cool things that would be fun in the game that might have some interesting decisions. Let's see if I zoom in on some of these this way. So interesting. Some of these oracles are cards that if you're doing something to score, boom, you can get glory points. And so vary. So the golden vow can vary. So I don't remember, like it was like a base 10 or 15 points for an item, but having one of these, you can get bonus points. So the death of the Minotaur is worth 15 glory points. So, there's like a base amount of points for going around killing stuff. And you might do that for the weaker guys, but you might not want to try to jump on the big tough dudes unless you got, you don't want to go for high risk unless you have a promise of higher return. All right, so I'm not going to look into that too much, but so here's a game. I wouldn't call this a card-driven game, but to some extent, the cards do affect your choices of what you're going to do, where and when, events, gods doing certain things, or the oracles. This game is you have a certain number of moves each turn. You're going to control heroes. It's driven by that log sheet with. Oh. All right, folks. Let's get back here to looking at these goodies. I think the one thing we didn't look at is what are these events here now? Is that too much glare? There's sort of volcanoes, earthquakes, tempests, pestilence, plague, famine. So the various gods can invoke these things, or they might come up on those event cards, etc. All right. So this is Mythology, Yaquinto Games, a hex encounter wargame-ish adventure game in the mythological genre. You are doing battle between gods, controlling heroes, controlling monsters. Let's zoom back out a bit. Yes, there we go. They can spend their points trying to control these different guys. I'm trying to remember if they can actually control these little guys or not, or that's just things that get moved from the encounter events and that the heroes can jump on or whatnot. Because the gods have all these different victory conditions, so multiple hidden victory conditions are a great aspect of multiplayer, war game play. You definitely wouldn't call this a Euro style game in that most of those have very, very little direct. Well, we lost image there for a second. Not sure why. We had plenty of space. We didn't have an alarm come off and kick us off. Not sure what was going on there. So let's wrap up, folks. Meandering Mike, Man Cave of Madness, game Mythology, hex encounter, war game. Yeah, I'm going to say yes. The gods are battling. They're controlling forces. It's similar somewhat in the way to, say, like the old Russian Civil War game from SPI, where you're controlling, various factions. Here you're controlling good guys and bad guys, and you're wresting control away from each other. It's on a nice hex map with nice counters, and you're doing battles. You have a combat system. It's not a Euro. You could cooperate. You could make deals with each other, but it's not one of those games that has very low confrontation, where you're sort of each doing your own thing, building your engine. Not at all. So, we are totally fine with putting this into our Hexagon Alley series as a hex encounter war game / adventure game for multiple players. I really don't remember if there was some solitaire version out there in the basic game or something. I know absolutely this would be very hard to play with the full advanced game, with the plotted control points, and trying to play that multiplayer. You'd really have to come up with some mechanism of how you want to do it where you're kind of bluffing. Does the person have more or less points? You don't reveal how many points you're really using to maybe make the person overconfident, and then later you wrest control easily from them, whatever. So I'm going to call it quits there. Little examination of Mythology from Yaquinto Games, 1980. I did not see who the designer was. J. Stephen Peak, who I believe was one of the originators of the Battle Line game company. He did some designs for them, and then I believe Battle Line Games got bought out by Avalon Hill, and maybe some by Yaquinto, but Bob Yaquinto, the head of Yaquinto Games, he hired J. Stephen Peak to come and design games for him. So he did at least, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 games for Yaquinto. So anyway, let's call it quits there. Meandering Mike, Man Cave of Madness. You all out there should take care. Don't offend the gods. And ciao.